Hello.
Hi, Rhea.
Hi, Apoorva.
Did we just start a pod?
Yeah, dude, I think we did.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to After 21. Rhea, we're actually in month 3 of recording episodes. Look at us.
I know. This is insane. I don't want to say I didn't think we'd make it this far, but I also just didn't look that far into the future.
I'm so excited to get started on today's topic because it's just something we've been looking forward to for a really long time. And the first ever episode today that we're actually going to focus on ourselves. So Rhea, why don't you take it away and introduce our audience to the topic for the month and the topic for today's episode?
Yeah. So our topic for the month is actually talking about relationships, and what better month than February with upcoming Valentine's. But today we're actually going to deep dive a little bit more into what a relationship means, specifically with yourself. I think oftentimes people think of relationships and only it's like a very one-track minded thing, but we forget the most important relationship, which is the relationship we have with ourselves.
I was literally going to say that this is the most important relationship that you need to develop as a person, even before you jump into that relationship, even before you start building a relationship with anybody else. It's so funny that Rhea and I were literally having a heart-to-heart conversation last night. Not any research for this podcast or anything, but just like a catch-up call as friends. And we were talking about how, we need to accept ourselves better before we expect anything from anybody else. So what better way to kick things off than fresh out of that conversation yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's something that a lot of us talk a lot about in general now that we're all getting older, and I don't know if it's actually symbolic of everybody starting to hit a quarter life crisis or if it's just something that a lot of us don't realize is important until we get to this age range.
It's definitely something I didn't have any insight into until I was in the third year of college or something. When I was like 20, it probably dawned on me that I was being extremely hard on myself, and I really didn't have a relationship with myself, because leading up to then, when you're in middle school or when you're just in school, right? When you're with your friends, you're told to study well, you're told to have a social life, you're told to go out and play sports. And then you go into college and you're like, land your first job, go through the college experience, which is kind of eye-opening for most people. And that's where, at least for me, I discovered that I had a very flawed relationship with myself. And I think over the past couple years was when I really began to deep dive into the whole self-love, like self-acceptance thing. And also helps that the whole industry right now is moving towards you got to focus on yourself before you commit to anybody else.
For sure. I think for me, I always had a relationship with myself, I guess, but I never paid attention to it probably until last year. And I wouldn't necessarily say my relationship was flawed, but I don't know if I understood the extent of the relationship with myself. I think it took me a while to even understand and peel off my layers, which I will say, once I started to actually kind of, I don't know if the right wording is focus on my relationship with myself, but focus on me, who I was, how I treat myself. It really made me a lot more confident and feel a lot better, I think, about myself too. I think I was kind of thrusted into a situation where I had to understand my relationship with myself and make sure I wasn't being hard on myself just from a circumstantial standpoint of what was going on. But it really taught me that you need to be in love with yourself to a certain extent. There are so many pieces to us that you don't sometimes even realize is within you, and whether or not they're inside of you, you also need to learn that they're just parts of you, and you need to fall in love with them and understand that that's what makes you you.
Exactly. I was literally going to say, a lot of times you prep to make others fall in love with you, right? Like you're told from the get-go that you need to behave, at least in my family, right? And I don't know if I can speak for everybody else, but my parents used to be like, Apoorva, you got to act this way. That auntie's coming, this auntie's coming, sit with your legs crossed. Like, don't speak your mind out, don't be so loud. And then as I got older, right, you go to school, and school can be a hard place, right? Kids are mean. Kids can bully you, which I got bullied. I didn't have that many friends because what I'd constantly hear from other people is, Apoorva, you're so loud, you're so boisterous, you're annoying. And then I got to college and I went through the same kind of motions. And so I started chipping off myself to come out as a person that fits into a circle. And like you said, it wasn't until very recently did I discover, oh my gosh, I need to, just by pretending to be someone else, you're actually making it harder for yourself to accept yourself. And, in order to fall in love with yourself, you need to accept every bit of yourself, whether that's good or whether that's bad. It's what makes you unique.
Yeah, I think it's also an interesting situation because I don't necessarily think that people know that they're not accepting certain parts of themselves. I think it's like a very subconscious thing. And sometimes you need the right people to also challenge you and bring that out. Like I would say, and ironically, as we caught up, this was something we talked about in a different perspective, but something that I think that has taught me a lot about myself this year was moving to a new city and making a lot of new friends. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting to hear even what my new friends, acquaintances, whatever it is, like what their perceptions were, and maybe things that they picked up on that I didn't even realize that I do, or I didn't realize that were a part of me. And just to hear someone else be like, oh, this is really cool, I like XYZ aspect of you, and then realize, oh, that's an aspect of me and I like that too. And just being aware that you like have that almost made me be like, wow, that's a cool quality that I have.
I mean, it's just one of those things, right? Like for most people, you never know anything about yourself until you put yourself in an uncomfortable position. So that could be something like if you're a person who's been at home for the longest time and then you move to college and you're alone in your dorm room, with this new friend, and you're just like clouded with so many people's judgments of you, or you're sitting alone with yourself, that's when you're just like, holy crap, this is the first ever time I've spent time with myself and I'm realizing all of these things about myself, so, or it could be your situation where you move to a new city altogether and make new friends and you discover pieces of you as you discover them, so I think really one of the things we want to highlight through this little bit is that you need to sit down and start accepting yourself and begin to fall in love with yourself. There's no right strategy to it, but and like Rhea said, there's no way you can realize how to fall in love with yourself unless you begin to be conscious of yourself and start taking time.
And I think a lot of it starts with just start being conscious about doing it, whether that's like, sitting down and just thinking about like, what is important to you? What makes you you? Like, what are your wants and your desires and how do you cater to them? I think everybody does it in a very different way. Like, do you go on walks by yourself and think about it? Do you work out? Do you journal? Do you take yourself out on a solo date? I met so many people this year who talked about how much they love going to the movies by themselves. Yeah. And I was like, what do you mean you like going to the movies by yourself? Like, it seems like such a foreign concept to me, but like, for me, I think one of the ways I fall in love with myself was going through spin classes, which is like the most absurd thing in the world. And it's like when your spin coach or whatever, like the instructor leading the class, like brings you through it and is like telling you what you can or cannot do and how you can push yourself. I was like putting myself in a different situation and learning about more about myself and like my wants and desires. So I was like, well, this is cool.
I know. I mean, She just like perfectly segued into the second bit that we want to talk to you guys about is how do you strike relationships? And like Rhea said, spin for context. Rhea, how do you explain spin for people who don't know what spin is? It's a high intensity class.
A high intensity cycle class. Yeah.
Yeah. With an instructor led class. Yeah. So it's just a form of exercise that's extremely, extremely hard, and you push yourself, and that's when you recognize how you react to like high pressure, right? That's one way.
I think it's more even just like it was reacting to high pressure taught me something, but it was like you're in a situation, you're strenuously beating your body up, but like mentally also you have to be there. And so to like help yourself mentally cope with it, I would put myself into a different situation that maybe would like make my head proud, like whether it was me going on a hike, whether it was me making some type of achievement in life, like career wise, family wise, whatever, like salary wise, whatever it was that was important to me, or even if it was like a social aspect, I kind of saw it there, and I saw myself pushing myself and working towards it, and it made me more comfortable and also fall in love with the idea of whatever I was putting in that place.
Yeah, I mean, another thing we want, we do, at least I do. I don't know if you do this, but this has worked for me right from the get-go. And I know a lot of people do this too, but it's journaling. We've already mentioned this before, but journaling is such an effective tool to sit down and understand. If you're a writer, right? Like if you like writing, you don't have to be a writer. If you like writing, journaling is something that I can attest to has got me through years. And you don't even have to do this every single day. You can just, if you're feeling really heavy in your head and you feel happy, or you feel like you need to talk to someone, but nobody's around you, but you have your book in front of you, that can be your friend. You know, you just journal things down and write your feelings.
More than just like, you don't need a book in front of you to do that. Like I actually a few days ago did it on my phone. Yeah, like I'm not your typical everyday journaler. I was at one point in time, actually. Like I think there was a point that was like really mentally a little bit tough. I went through a situation that very much like broke me, and then I had to build myself back up. And then I would wake up and journal and go to sleep and journal. But now it's more of like a when my brain needs to think about it, but like go on a walk and just like type on your phone, on your notes app. You can pretend like you're writing a text to a friend to like explain the situation or whatever.
Another couple things we think that works for most people, or at least is a great way to get started, is meditation. That's hard. I know a lot of people have said it time and again. Every self-help book said it. Every podcaster said it. Every news article said it, but I think it definitely helps. You don't have to, there's so many apps that on the market that you can get started with. But meditation for me has been so great just because I'm someone who's extremely frantic with 100 million thoughts. And when I was an athlete, it's helped me. When I quit my sport and started transitioning into the real world, it's helped me. Again, it's just, I think what we're trying to get at is providing you tools that you can experiment with which ultimately leads you to chip away some time for yourself. That's the most important part of building a relationship with yourself.
Totally. Which leads us to like, I think another point of it, which is just, you also want to make sure that you want to treat yourself like you're treating others. I think one of the main things that people often don't think of is you're a lot harder on yourself because you're just like, oh, it's myself, like whatever, it's my narrative, like I have to push myself, I have to do whatever, and really just like keep going. But what we forget is we treat everybody else like with such kindness. And I feel so, I don't want to say hypocritical, but it's more of like very, very repetitive because I feel like everyone says this and it's so annoying. Like treat yourself with love and kindness has become like a very out there repetitive situation, which I know is just very redundant. But I think it's more about like before you do anything is treat yourself like you would treat any other friend, because you'll be nicer to your friends than you probably would be to yourself.
That's such a good point. I mean, like, no matter how commercial this point has become, it's kind of worth reiterating because you're never kind to yourself. You're so, I mean, we as people are so, I guess, programmed to be critical on ourselves, because that's just how the nature of the game is. You are nice to everybody around you. You're so supportive. Like I even like remember so many instances when someone's going through exactly what I'm going through, and I say something like, you got this, like it's part of the
So
process.
nice.
Yeah. And then you go back and you're talking to yourself and you're just like, how dare you? You can't even get this done. Like, what the heck?
You're so stupid. I can't believe you're not even. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's just so, because if you ever said it to someone else, they would be like, how dare you talk to me like that?
Yeah. I mean, a part of, and it's just not even performance related, right? Like being, I don't know, compassionate and empathetic to your body is another part of being nice to yourself. Being, you never would tell anybody you're fat or you're heavy, but you tell yourself, you look at yourself in the mirror and you're just like, you're touching your belly, you're touching your arms, you're touching every different part of your body. And you're like, that is extra fat. You need to chip it off. Or if you were a man, you'd look at your biceps, like, I'm a lanky piece of shit and I need to bulk up, or, something like that. And it's just, it's those little things that you need to be so self-aware of when you talk to yourself. And I think that's just, as simple as, don't be so critical about yourself, because you're stripping away the love, and you would never, I guess, in hindsight, ever treat another person in the same way you treat yourself.
And I think a lot of it goes back to one thing that we've talked about here, which is like, it's just being conscious about what you're doing to yourself and what your relationship is like with yourself. I think the most important takeaway, if you only have one from this episode, is more of like, the first step is to even like acknowledge that you have a relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
Because once you do that, there's a lot more to it. And then I think everything kind of flows into place, because you also know yourself best. But like, you have to acknowledge the fact that that's the first and foremost relationship in your life.
Yeah. And it takes work. It's so easy for us to sit here, as like I said at the start of the episode, we were literally being self-judgmental and critical last night about ourselves. And it took each other to remind ourselves that, hey, we got this. We're on this random journey that we are pursuing. And the most important person you're accountable to is yourself. So in that process, if we're going to be harsh to ourselves, we're going to burn out. And my family, Rhea, I'm sure your family says this too, because we're very alike with how we work. But when you push yourself so much and people who you love sees you kind of burn out and burn your personality, they know. They're always just like, you got to take a step back and ask yourself what you're doing. And that's what we kind of urge you guys to as well. Ask yourself how you're feeling. Ask yourself what it is that you are quote unquote lacking. Ask yourself what is hurting in your body? Like, what is it that,
I would also say that you also like know yourself best. So if you're in a situation where you're like that, you know what your end goal is, maybe, or maybe you don't know sometimes, and you're like, I don't know why I'm acting this way, or I don't know why I'm putting myself in this situation. But sitting down and taking the time for yourself to understand that, and like, it's the same thing. If your friend is acting out, you would be like, okay, what is going on? Like, let's decode this. And sometimes you got to be your best friend and decode it for yourself. And then you figure out what's going on and how to help yourself best.
Yeah. In sport, actually, my coach used to always say, it's a very common terminology that people use and say, which is listen to your body. And for us, that interpretation is listen to yourself. Anything that you do, listen to yourself.
So with that, I know this has definitely been a lot shorter of an episode, but I think building a relationship with yourself is something that also we want to emphasize is not a huge, big thing. It's something that's super simple and you can intertwine into your everyday lives. And I think the length of this episode is very symbolic of the fact that it's just so easy.
So simple.
To like just kind of go through and do it. But I know we also talked about a few different topics and really intertwine them together. So we want to actually make sure that the takeaways here are very, very clear. So number one step in building a relationship with yourself is acknowledging that you have a relationship with yourself and falling in love with yourself. And that means falling in love with every single aspect of yourself.
And number two is understand your wants, desires, and capabilities. How do you do that? Take a walk, exercise, journal, meditate, go on a hike, take yourself on dates, whatever it is that facilitates some time that you chip off for yourself, we're game with.
And number three, treat yourself like you treat others. Don't be too critical on yourself. You're not your worst critic. You're supposed to be your best friend. So act like your best friend, be your biggest support system, and be your own cheerleader so you can cheer yourself on.
Oh, yeah. With that, you guys, we just wrapped up episode 9. Oh my gosh, episode 9 and the first for season 3. So thank you, everybody, for your endless support. And leave us a review on Spotify. That's very important. We know how we do as a podcast once you guys hit the review button. So thanks so much. And make sure to like, share, subscribe everywhere.
Bye, guys.